Before I tell you some of the history of our community, I want to first acknowledge that this land that we live on was inhabited long before the history I will share. Did you know there's a spot in our county called 5 Points that was the intersection of 5 different American Indian trails at which Indian chiefs from the region's different tribes would gather for tribal councils? Today, the intersections of Langston Chapel, Harville, and Burkhalter roads mark that spot. Most of the indigenous people in these parts were part of one of the various Creek Indian tribes. General Oglethorpe made an agreement with one of the chiefs of these tribes to take over this land, leaving other parts that were had special requests for them. When I was a child, we would still occasionally find an arrowhead in a lake or a river in these parts and under the dirt. Feel something and pull it up and find one. Of course, all the Indians in Georgia were removed in the 1820s. So that is a part of our history too. And I hope that our state legislatures will allow this to be taught to our students. Now, when I was in 3rd grade at Manalavalli Elementary School back in 1958, Miss Ruth Lee was my teacher. And she was teaching us a unit on community for social studies and shared with us how many communities got started. Many were started because they were areas on a waterway or a river, a natural harbor where a ship or a boat could land, and folks who stopped there would need supplies, and some stayed and settled the area. Later, communities would grow up around a crossroads where 2 highways or 2 roads crossed, and some would put up a store with gas and other things that people needed as they were passing by, and then others would put up other stores and churches and schools and more. She also shared a special story of how Leafield, Georgia came to be. Y'all know Leafield, Georgia? You ever heard of it? Okay, it's near Brooklyn. Her family owned a farm not too far from Brooklyn, Georgia, and some train tracks were built right across one of the fields on her family's farm. The train needed a place to put one of those tanks that you used to see where they would have the train stop to get water for the steam engines. And so they bought or leased some of the property in the middle of her family's field for that. Since the train would always stop there, someone put up a little store where folks could get supplies, and so it went. A little community developed with church, school, stores. A lot of them are closed now. And they just kept calling it Leafield because it was the Lee Field. That's how it got its name. But Statesboro was different. We live in a community that was intentionally planned, a planned community. On February 8, 1796, Bulloch County was created from Bryan and Scriven counties by an act of the General Assembly. Georgia's 21st county was named for Archibald Bulloch. He was Georgia's first provisional governor. Some folks assumed that Archibald Bulloch was from this area. And at the time, somebody had a restaurant called Archibald's, you may remember. But he was not. But the state chose to name this county after him. The county was considered to be one of Georgia's largest at the time. And a wealthy Maryland businessman who'd settled in Augusta, George Siebold, spelled S-I-B-B-A-L-D, but often spelled S-I-E-B-O-L-D, was convinced by the Georgia legislature of the benefits he would accrue by buying and donating land for a judicial center on the wilderness frontier. That's what we were at the time. In 1801, George Siebold of Augusta donated 9,301 acres, a tract, for a centrally located county seat for the growing agriculture community. There wasn't anything here. It was just fields. But George Siebold donated that money for Bulloch County, and a courthouse was built because it was going to be the county seat. So a courthouse was built. In December of 1803, the Georgia legislature created the town of Statesboro. The community was most likely named after the notion of states' rights and issues central in the 1800 United States presidential election. And interestingly, We are the only Statesboro in the world. The area was developed by white planters, largely for cotton plantations, Sea Island cotton, that were worked by enslaved Black people. And there were some small farms as well. In 1807, the first courthouse was replaced by a larger wooden building, which served until Sherman's March to the Sea in 1864, and it was burned down. In 1874, 9 years after the Civil War ended, a group of former enslaved people of the Riggs, Donaldson, Parrish, and Hall families founded the Willow Hill School to serve the area's Black children. Georgia Ann Riggs, aged 15 and formerly enslaved, was the area's first Black teacher. And some of those families still live in that area. And of course, now they have a wonderful historical building and museum there. There was no public education in Georgia until the time of Reconstruction. None. If you were wealthy enough, you could pay for tutors, or you could send your children off to a boarding school or something. No public education. But then during Reconstruction, during that short period of time when the legislature was taken over by progressives for a short period of time, they enacted statutes for the education of all children. So the city of Statesboro was a planned community with streets around the courthouse planned for the purpose of commerce and legal matters. It was one of those build it and they will come kind of things. Where there is a court, there will be people coming who need other services. And therefore, in the midst of 9,000 acres of donated agricultural land, Statesboro rose on eagle's wings. And we've been rising ever since. Now, there's so much history that I could share, but there is no time for all of it. Instead, I'm choosing to tell you a story that my 95-year-old mama told me about a very special memory of Statesboro that she had when she was a child. My mama moved to Statesboro from Brooklyn when she was in the 4th grade. And she really did not want to leave Brooklyn. She liked that school and liked those teachers. But this is where her dad, Theodore Roosevelt Rogers, could find work as a concrete and masonry man. And they moved into a small 2-room apartment in a building that still stands on the corner of West Jones Avenue and South College Street. If you go think about those corners, there's one that has the nursing home, but catty corner across from that is an apartment building. It's bricked up now, but that's where she lives in a two-room, not a 2-bedroom, a 2-room apartment right there. This particular story takes place when my mom was 10 years old. Her little sister, Evelyn, was 4, and her mother, Maddie Newton Rogers, was pregnant with her baby sister, Betty. That year was early 1937. I found through the Digital Commons an ad in the 1936 Bulloch Times and Statesboro News. The ad was purchased by Jake Fine, indicating that he had sold his business and merchandise to his friends from Sylvania, H. Minkovitz and Sons. And then I found another ad purchased by the Minkovitz, indicating the store was having a reorganization sale under new management. So that's when it changed over to Minkovitz. Now, this is the story in the middle of the city, which currently houses Scott Marchbank's store, Frills. For those of you that came along later, may not remember Minkovitz. Mama said as a way to get folks to come in and shop at that store, they started giving raffle tickets when you purchased items. For each dollar you spent, you got a raffle ticket. And the raffle they had, they were going to give away a brand new 1937 Plymouth. Mama thinks that they had the drawing in January of 1937, but she wasn't sure, and I could find no newspapers for that time period. She said you had to be present to win. They were poor, but her mom did have 6 tickets. 6 tickets. My grandfather had a job he had to do at the home right across the street from their apartments on the other side of West Jones and South College, and that home is currently belongs to Rosina Warshaw, a friend of Martha Hughes. Mama says every time she goes by that house, she thinks of her dad laying those bricks that closed in the bottom of that house between the posts that kept it off the ground because of that event that happened that day. That's in her mind. So he didn't go with them, but laughed and said he would gladly walk back and get the old car if they actually won the new Plymouth. Mama said downtown was full and people were standing all out in the street as far as you could see. She remembers they were standing under the traffic light, which was the only one in town at that time, right down the middle of town. Mama had to hold on to her little sister's hand, and her mom held the other to make sure they stayed together in the big crowd. And everyone they had a stage out in front of Mickovitz. They were up there on the stage going to draw for the ticket. Everyone had their tickets out so they could see the number, read to see if they won the raffle. Some folks, Mama said, had hundreds of tickets. And Grandmama had her 6. They pulled the ticket out and read the number. And my grandmother said, "My God, I've got it." Mama said she'd never heard Mama use God's name like that. Maddie Rogers raised the tickets and started moving through the crowd, tagging Evelyn and Mama coming on behind her. She's pregnant, getting up there to the stage, making that pass through that crowd. And they parted the way so they could get up there. Mama said they gave Grandmama the keys right then and there and told her all the paperwork she needed was in the pocket of the car. And the crowd cheered. Mama said that she felt that they were happy for them. And although some folks had thought that the rumors were that the raffle would be rigged, they knew when this poor family won the car with just 6 tickets that it was not. Mama said that Mr. Mickovitz was always a fair man. So they got in the car and made their way down South Main, okay, and turned on West Jones Avenue. And Mama said as soon as they made that turn, Grandmama started putting down on the horn, blowing the horn, blowing the horn. Granddaddy quit his work and came toward them and said, "Damn, you actually won it." Mama said she'd never heard him say a cuss word before, but Grandma didn't get mad. He said, "Well, I guess I'll have to walk up and get the old Pontiac." Grandma said, "No, get in. We're going to take you up there." Mama said that having that nice car affected how she felt about herself. But about 6 years later, Granddaddy got sick and could not work for 6 months. So they had to sell the car and buy an old Model T. But that's life. And it was good they had something of value to sell and get them through that hard time. Now that was just a little peek into a happy time for my mama back in the 30s. The 40s and the war brought a lot of soldiers into Statesboro who were stationed at the Army airfield here. They actually have an airfield in Statesboro, and soldiers came in and were stationed. And Mama said that a lot of them frequented my granddaddy Altman's store, which sold beer at the time. It was right across from the courthouse on Cortlandt Street. That's where his store was. Where they had the district attorney and all that. No, that's where his store was. My granddaddy Altman later rented the store next door and opened. Now back then Buggy and Wagon was there, I think. Way back then his store was next. Back then, my granddaddy owned a grocery store that sold beer, and that beer sold so well that he decided he would rent the store next door and open a liquor store, a full-fledged package shop, Altman package store. So yes, we had liquor stores in Statesboro. Some people think this upcoming vote was the first time since prohibition was over. No, we had liquor stores in Statesboro, because my granddaddy owned one on Cortlandt Street. That action of putting up that liquor store got him kicked out of First Baptist Church. But that's another sermon. My dad and his brother Buren had started selling used cars at 37 North Main Street. And so Granddaddy quit the liquor business right before the county went dry and went into the car business with them. Now, growing up here in the 50s and 60s was pretty good for me. Both of my parents worked. Daddy sold cars and Mama was a hairdresser. And we had moved on up to the great middle class. And I lived right in town, right near First Baptist Church, walked all over town. I later realized those good old days weren't so good for a whole lot of folks, especially Black folks and others who were oppressed in many ways. I've spent a lot of time since then working on myself and this community to change that, but we still have much work to do. I asked my Facebook friends who live in Statesboro to share with me things they would celebrate about living here and things they think we needed to improve. The celebration list included caring people, clean air and water, beautiful trees, a diversified economy, a progressive city government, a major university, community organizations and churches that contribute to the welfare of our citizens, a police force with good leadership trying to make improvements, and beautiful parks. My friends believe we need to work on these things: paving roads and improving sidewalks, improving diversity in our county leadership, providing more services for veterans and people with disabilities, better education for all children in Bulloch County, the need to eradicate poverty and food insecurity that accompanies poverty, implementing more environmentally sustainable practices, and advocating for programs that actually help people. Now, you may have other things that you'd like to add to those lists, and we can talk about that in our discussion after the service. But it does seem that we have a lot to celebrate and a lot to work on. When I was growing up here, Statesboro had a slogan. It was, "Welcome where nature smiles and progress has the right of way." Now, I suppose that can be interpreted in different ways. Progress for some folks seems to be harmful to others. We need progress for all people, and we need for nature to be able to smile in every corner. So we just need to expand the goodness that is already here. And Unitarian Universalists can be good partners with others in our community who want to do just that. So may it be so. And that is my message for you today.